modestly, very modestly, probably an overstatement. And my parents preached education, man. So was able to do well at high school, go to college, finish my undergrad degree in marketing and management, finished my master's in business administration, did both of those by 23 years old, started my career in business at a company called Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio, was there for 7 years, and then moved out west to California to work for a company called McKesson, which is in the healthcare space. I was there for a little over a year and then moved back to Kentucky to start my first company, which was called Cervantes. So I wanted to partner nonprofits and socially conscious businesses. And the catalyst for that was seeing, if you've ever been to a major metro, California in particular, and you see this homelessness, it's an epidemic, man. It's atrocious. And so I'm going to work. I'm living in this beautiful home, I'm going to work in these multi-million-dollar businesses in the financial district. And I just couldn't reconcile how we as human beings have allowed this to be okay. Like, how do we have so much wealth and money and resources and adopt an ideology that says it's okay for these folks to be on the side, sleeping in tents or sleeping in sleeping bags, and just we're ignoring them. And something it was a level of conviction I've never had in my life, really, and wanted to get back to my roots. So moved back to Kentucky, started a business, never ran a business, didn't know what it was like to be an entrepreneur. So that went away after about 3 years of working full time. Got a call to go do some work at Amazon in the finance space back in 2017. So back in corporate, was there for 3.5 years, incredible experience. But when the pandemic hit, I had this inspiration hit again of like, I need to get back to the mission. And I was in Georgia at the time, outside of Atlanta. So I ended up moving back to Kentucky right maybe 4 or 5 months into the pandemic. Can y'all hear that? Is that me?
Yeah. Cody, it's on you. Cody, it always is on your end, buddy.
I was making sure that I didn't do anything improperly.
I just blame it on Cody.
Fair enough.
Sorry. I'm just breaking your balls, Cody. Don't worry about it. Okay, go on, man.
Yeah, all good. So yeah, moved back a few months after the pandemic and just got to work. So started another company called I Love Books, and I Love Books is a brand. It's a merch brand that promotes obviously a love for reading, a love for books, and really the mission is to raise the awareness of this problem that we have, which is illiteracy. And I got to that conclusion by trying to figure out, how do our homeless brothers and sisters end up homeless, and why do we have crime? Why do we have violence? And what you'll learn in doing that research is, if you are illiterate, you have very little chance of being successful in life, especially in our high academic learning economy right now. If you can't read, then it's going to be a very, very big challenge. And so you start peeling these layers back and realizing that illiteracy is one of the root causes to a lot of the problems that we have as a society. And so part of the challenge and why people end up illiterate is they don't have books at home. So I Love Books is the brand that's going to address that. And we're going to address that by selling our products, promoting literacy, promoting the love for reading and books, and using 50% of our net profits to donate books to either one of our nonprofit partners or a Title I school in Kentucky. So hopefully that's not too long-winded of a response, but just an idea of how we went from hazard to now I'm actually in Atlanta, funny enough, but how we went from hazard to building I Love Books and where we're at now.
That's great. You'll have to, Cody, like Outcast Press and Anxiety Press, we should, I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we should work out some details see if we can work out some kind of a deal to get some stuff with what you're doing, because so far it sounds like what you're doing is just absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, I think a while back I read that most people, like they're literate, but they're functionally illiterate. Like they can read
Sure.
at like, right, they read at like a third, fourth grade level and then kind of tap out. So it's like, yeah, they can, I mean, and then of course, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but my assessment of it would be, well, that's the perfect reading level for subservience, right? Because you're just smart enough to be able to take orders from your capitalist masters, but you're too dumb. But you're too dumb to be able to read something and realize how bad you're getting fucked every fucking day, you know. So of course, it's in the interest of the capitalist masters to be like, make sure you know how to read this sign and this sign, but you know, so don't read anything that might get you to actually, you know, think an original thought, question our power. So
Absolutely.
That would be my cynical aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is spot on, and the first part of it is, and the way that I digest what you're saying is just critical thinking. So the system is not designed to have critical thinkers, and the system since the beginning, you know, even with my ancestors, it was illegal for Black people to read in this country. And there's a reason for that. Like, it wasn't a law just to be a law. There is a system that's designed to get a consistent result over and over and over with minimal effort. And that's what's happened. So yes, you're exactly right. And even if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, like in just how we were going to factories, that's what we were designed to do, was to go to work. It wasn't to be thinkers, because thinkers can't be controlled. So if you need to control people, how do you do that? And it's exactly what you were saying, Sebastian. It's, hey man, yeah, you can read, you're smart enough to take these orders and read these directions, but you don't have the ability to think in a critical form, which especially right now is extremely important.
Yeah, there's a really good book that you might want to check out. I forget, I can see it on my bookshelf, but called Epistemic. It's called Epistemic Injustice, and the author outlines. Hang on, let me just look it up so I can get the two.
Miranda Fricker.
Yeah, Miranda Fricker, and she outlines two different kinds of. I just want to get the quick Wikipedia of the two kinds of epistemic injustice, and this goes to what you're talking about. I mean, sort of. So there's testimonial injustice, which this doesn't, I guess, relate to reading in particular, but it's is unfairness related to trusting somebody's word. An injustice of this kind can occur when someone is ignored or not believed because of their sex, gender, presentation, race, disability, or etc. And of course, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but certainly, you know, if you were to take someone were to take the stand, someone's more likely to believe a police officer, even though they have a known record of pathological lying, over, let's say, someone like you, right? Because they're going to say, oh, Black guy, he's probably a thug or whatever. I mean, and so with epistemic injustice, it's an injustice of somebody as a knower, but then more importantly is hermeneutical injustice, which is an injustice that is from an impoverished epistemic environment where they can't make sense of what's going on. So like one of the examples used was like sexual harassment in, let's say, the 50s, right? So back then, like women just, it's okay, it's just fine to have your ass grabbed and, you know, all of this. They didn't really have this framework, this understanding that no, that's not okay. And I would say a lot of people who, and this is where literacy comes in, like they don't see how bad their clock is being cleaned, as it were, right? How bad they're really getting it. And I don't mean to drone on, but like from my understanding, this was like Malcolm X's moment of realization. Was he went to prison, he read just so much he had to get glasses, and he read, whoa, like what the fuck? And he came out there like super educated, super well read. So, I mean, reading also lets you get a framework for understanding different things that are happening to you and be like, no, that's not normal. Like, no, it's not normal to have houses readily available and not let people live and then still allow homelessness, right? It's not, that's not how a good society works. But if you don't have that, you just say, well, it's like that old cliche, which is, the old didactic thing about fish and water, right? Where one fish comes up to another one. How's the water, boys? What's water?
What's
right?
water? Yeah.
What's water? Yeah. So unless you're made aware of it, right? You just think, oh, it's just, sorry, I've droned on long enough. But no, that was my, just to say, everything you said was awesome. So
I'm with you. And I appreciate the perspective for sure. I mean, my belief about this whole game, and I worked in corporate finance, so I understand capitalism. I get it. I did not understand it growing up. I didn't have money. I didn't know what to do with money. Even when I started making money, I was still financially illiterate. And I think that speaks to somebody with a business degree, a master's in business, but I still didn't understand financial literacy in a way that I should have, because no one had an incentive to tell me. How is it that you have a master's, you have a bachelor's, there's people with doctorates, there's people who've worked in corporate, there's people who have their own business. I mean, all this stuff, and yet none of us learned balancing just a regular checkbook, as they would say back in the day, or more importantly, just understanding your money, like how that even works. And then in this game, ignorance is the way you keep people where they are, and whether that's financial, which obviously is important because that's your livelihood, or if it's just mental and understanding how laws get made, how things actually happen. And there's also an element of keeping people distracted, man. Like we'll have it, and we see this all the time. We'll see an issue, and then that issue will be front page news for 2 or 3 days, and then something else will be. And the powers that be, so to speak, they know that we can't focus, we can't concentrate and hone in on addressing one thing, just one thing at a time. Let's deal with this thing, and then we'll move to the next. But the groups of people who make things happen are the people that realize this is how you get things done. And those are probably well-read folks, people who are definitely beyond functional literacy and are active learners. And, you feel differently about yourself. You feel differently, going back to the point that was made earlier about what you deserve, what's right, what's wrong. I've had those same experiences, and it's very fascinating. I had no idea that there was such a problem with literacy. It just was something I took for granted. And I think a lot of us take it for granted if you are truly literate and beyond that 3rd, 4th grade level. But, you mentioned Malcolm X. It absolutely changed his life and the trajectory of what he was about and what he was able to accomplish. This man read the dictionary. Like, who does that?
Eminem does that.
Yeah. What's that? You say Eminem?
I've done that.
Really?
I've done that.
Wow.
I've done that. Eminem reads the dictionary.
And so that puts you in just this elite category of thinkers, because you have knowledge that other people don't. When I think about what the books that are on my bookshelf at home, I have all of this information that's downloaded into my brain. It's like a computer system. I mean, we are humans. We built computers. We're beyond what a computer can do. We barely tap into what we're capable of. And so the person that downloads 300 books into their mind versus the person who hasn't read a book since 1992, like, they're not going to be on the same level. And y'all are talking about reading the dictionary. I mean, your vocabulary has to be outstanding. Why? Because you can read it. You've learned, you've taught yourself. And so there are a lot of, it's almost like illiteracy in the core. And then there are these spokes that are around it that lead to all of these other thoughts and conversations that are just very, very fascinating. But I've decided what my lane is. I've made a decision on what I want my life to be. I want to inspire people to read. I want to inspire kids to read and understand that life is bigger than sports and entertainment. I want to be a source of light in this world that seems fairly dark at times. And that's my way of contributing. And I think we all have our own separate ways of contributing that are extremely helpful and needed. And this whole book thing, this literacy game is my angle.
Yeah, and I would say, I would say that they don't, and this isn't the teacher's fault. This is more because they don't have any control over their classroom anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the types of books that are chosen, they don't really engage, right? I mean, especially now, feel free to correct me if I make a mistake in my assessment here. But I mean, I would imagine, at least from my conversations with a lot of my other like Black friends, part of why they would kind of turn them off was they weren't feeling themselves represented. And so do you think that for you, it would be like, that's a stumbling block for like minority communities of like, got to expose them to the people on like, a very rich tradition. I mean, we have this stupid debate in here about like, cutting classics or whatever. And it's like, no, it's just expanding them. Why do you don't have to cut anything? You just expand them.
Sure.
Like, there's a rich, as you know, there's a rich literary tradition in the Black community, the Asian communities. Some of the best, one of the best books that me and Cody just finished a book, Tender is the Flesh. It's written by Augustina, I can't pronounce her last name, an Argentinian woman. It was phenomenal. And so would you say that that's a big stumbling block, at least when it comes to minority communities, is that they just see just a bunch of fucking white dudes, and it's like they can't relate. Just like I couldn't relate to like The Great Gatsby when I was in high school. I'm just like, I'm poor. What do I give a shit? It wasn't until I was 30 that I could appreciate it, right? But like, that's like a universal experience. Like a universal experience is like, what do I care about these rich assholes? And then you get to 30 and you're like, you mature. Yeah.
Sure. No, that's absolutely correct. It's one of the top 3 barriers to achieving literacy for any marginalized group of people. So, honestly, there are white kids in very white communities that still don't feel represented for whatever reason, or the books are just not of interest to them. And so you have to, it's not as simple as just giving a book. And I'm glad you put that point out there. So you have to have the right types of books for the right types of kids. And it's really no different for adults. A lot of adults don't like to read because they haven't found their thing to read. So it's boring. It's like anything else. If I haven't found the right foods to cook, maybe I never become a chef. But if I find that thing that's mine, man, I love to bake. I love to fry. I love to air fry. Whatever it is, you got to find your thing, which takes the exposure. I was just talking to a couple of folks about this the other day. Exposure, especially at an early age, is one of the best things that we can do for kids, because it gives them the opportunity to figure out what their thing is at a much younger age than what a lot of us have figured it out. And so, and even as I think back to when I was growing up, I'm really not sure. I wouldn't have considered myself a reader as a kid. I was smart, fortunately. Definitely read all my textbooks. Straight A student, but I also played sports. I was involved in my dad's church, and so there was a lot of different things as a part of me. But I definitely felt that. I grew up in a place where in high school, I think we had 1,200 people, and there were 4 Black people. 3 of them were my siblings. So it was like, where do you find something that looks like you? And one of the greatest gifts that I had that was a little different for me was that my dad was a preacher. So even though it wasn't necessarily a book, like a leisure book, every Sunday I'm seeing reading, and I'm seeing an adult male read. My number 1 adult male role model read. So all of those things, the right content, seeing adults read, seeing people who look like you talk about reading, actually watching them read and reading together. These are things that we have to do in order to get kids to read and become true lifelong learners to where they also want to read the dictionary. They want to expand their vocabulary. They want to be considered a thought leader in whatever capacity that they can. So great point. Definitely, not even just my opinion. That's statistically proven that kids need to see representation. Otherwise, they'll just tune out in a lot of cases.
Well, and exposing to them young, right? So like
For sure.
I credit. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like there was periods, there was dry spells when I was, growing up, raising hell, more worried about, doing various illicit activities. But I mean, the one thing that stuck with me was growing up. My mom introduced me very early to books. She would read to me every night, and she would expose me to a whole bunch of different things. And you know how kids get fixated on like one. It's like I would get fixated on one book, and then she'd be like, no, okay, you do that one, but then we're going to do another one.
Yeah.
And it was a together thing. And it's really nice to see someone like one of our authors at Outcast Press, Sean McCallum. He reads with his kids. Like you'll see him, like you'll see him reading alongside his kids who are also reading. And I see pictures of that, and I'm like, they're going to be all right. Like they're going to do fine. Like they're reading with you, and they're seeing you also read. So anyway, Cody, I've been dominating the time. Feel free to chime in if ever I'm.
Yeah, that's I mean that's right. I mean the best way to turn your kids into a reader is to have them or have them see you do it. I mean kids mimic what they see in their environment, so I mean it's natural, it makes sense. Yeah, I mean.
So Cody, what do you have your kids read? Like, what do you like? Do you read in front of your son, and like, do you buy like your kids' book, like your son books and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I buy him anything I think he'll like. He's really into the series Last Kids on Earth, I think is the name of the series. He likes that series a lot, and then I'm always reading, so he's always seeing me read.
Okay.
Even when he was like a baby, I would just read, and not even like children's books. I would just like something I was reading, I would just read out loud as I was reading it, and just as he went to sleep. I read Tom Brokaw's book to him when he was like 6 months old. I read that. So
he absorbed all of that. I'm sure.
Yeah, it was like the history of the '60s, I think it was. I don't remember the name now, Boom or something. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, and plus they just want you to spend time with them anyway. So I mean, he doesn't know what you're saying, but he knows you're there. So I mean.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like Tiger Woods was considered the greatest golfer of our generation, whether you like golf or even Tiger, that's not the point of it. The point of it is when Tiger was 2, all he did, his dad was super intentional with it. He said, my son is going to be the guy that changes the golf industry forever. And when he was 2, he's swinging a club at 2 years old. That's abnormal, but he knew he had a plan. Venus and Serena Williams, their father, the movie came out recently, King Richard, same deal. Like, and it's no different than what we're talking about with being a reader. If you are that intentional, it's going to happen. It's like anything else. Our subconscious minds. So even if Cody, even if your son didn't absorb it in the sense of understanding and comprehending, it was put into that bank, into that memory somewhere where it's downloaded nonetheless. And so when you understand the power of that, then yes, you start reading to your children in the womb. My younger sister recently had twins, and super intentional. Like, we know all the data, we know all the research, we know it's got to start early. So that's what she was doing prenatal. She's reading, listening to music, still the same today. And I think, we are all aware, and this is what happens in these systems where if you break out of it, you can get it and you can be okay. To your point, Sebastian, like, yeah, they're going to be okay. The challenge is the awareness. And we are aware of reading to kids is important. We're aware that giving them the right material is important. We're aware that being a learner is valuable. But if you take the greatest parent on the planet and you don't have, and they're functionally illiterate, the chances of them knowing that they should do this is very slim. So that's how you get these cycles that continue and these patterns that continue. Is just ignorance. It's the lack of awareness. So then the question is, how does this even happen? And going back to the point about the education system, and it's never a shot to the educators themselves, because they're working within the confines of this system. The system was not designed to produce well-read, highly intelligent, critical thinkers. It's just, that's not what it was designed. And we haven't had an education system overhaul since this time, where we were sending people to school to learn how to be obedient. This is what you do when the bell rings. This is what you do at this time. You sit down. And that's not how we operate as adults in this real world. Like, most of the things that it takes to be successful, we're told not to do. Like, think out of the box, be creative, have more than one way of solving a problem. These are things that you get dinged for. So it's just a really fascinating thing. And there's so many issues that we have in our society and in our world that it's hard for us to stay focused on one thing. But my belief, in especially coming from the corporate world where we're paid a lot of money to just solve problems, my belief is awareness is the number one gap, because you have a lot of people that want to do the right thing, especially parents who just don't know. They don't know, and they don't have the resources to learn. But if you tell the parent in the hospital, you need to start reading to your child, I know they're not going to be able to hear you. I know they're not going to understand you. They're just going to be looking at you. I get it. But I promise you, you're giving them the greatest gift that you can give. A good parent is going to do that 10 times out of 10. We just got to get that information to them. So, kudos to you for reading to the youngins, man. It's so impactful. It just doesn't seem that way, man. But it's super, super critical.
I always enjoyed it too. I mean, I like reading to kids.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also the hurdle of there's always been a deeply fascist strain in America. And so book recommendation, Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works. It's outstanding.
Good book.
Yeah, it's just great. He's just fantastic. I met him once. I say I met him once, but I just urinated next to a urinal where he was at, so I count that as meeting him. So like it was one of those moments where I was at a conference and he was the keynote speaker, and I was planning on like introducing myself, and the only opportunity that I saw him, and I'm just like, you know what, this is gonna be weird if I'm like another guy talking to, like, so I just let it go. So like that's how I met him, was we urinated together. I've told this before, but anyway, that's not the point.
Love it. That's so funny.
No, that's not the point. The point is like, no, I mean, there's always like a deep, like fascist strain in America tied to anti-intellectualism, right? So like in America, I mean, even Philip K. Dick commented on this, that his work, he said, my work is more well received in France than in America. Well, why is there anti-intellectualism? Well, obviously authoritarians don't, like I said before, they don't want well-educated people. And like, you hear politicians, and this goes back to this is the fascist strain, bordering on a subset of that, which would be sort of a Nazi strain, which is like, how you hear like politicians talk about real America? What's real America to them?
Right.
Rural America, ones who work with their hands, one who are in the field, ones who are right where cities are always attacked. Why? Well, because there's a lot of cultural intermixing and whatever, and those are the places where bad things happen. But real America is where people use their hands. Fun fact, what saying was put in German above concentration camps.
Yep.
Make Germany
Work will set you
great
free.
again.
Work will set you free.
Oh wow. Gee.
So whenever you hear about these, whenever you tell, I mean, that's the thing is it's like, work. Whenever you hear all of these politicians talking about how important hard work is and, how real Americans, they have calluses on their hands, and then, but in Germany, they would show, oh, look at these Jews. And they would hold up their hands. Look they haven't worked a day in their life. Right. So again, this goes back to education where it's like, most people don't know that. Most people don't know. If you go there in German, it says work will set you free. And the problem that they saw was, oh, well, the Jews are this lazy. Wow. Where have we also heard that before?
Yeah.
About black people.
Yeah.
Right.
And now we're hearing it about Mexicans coming or immigrants coming to America. At least that's what I recall a few years ago. There was a presidential guy that was talking about similar sentiments. So yeah, I mean so this is the crazy part. So even if you go back to when I was in grad school, there was a guy, one of our professors, we were in a leadership class, and the professor asked, who are some examples of really great leaders? And you got the typical answers, the Dr. Kings and, the Thurgood Marshalls or Mother Teresa's and all of those folks. And somebody raised their hand and was like, Adolf Hitler. And everybody looked like, wait, what? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this person said that Adolf Hitler was a great leader. The question wasn't a good, morally sound leader. The question was a leader. What is a leader? A leader has followers. They get people to do things that they want them to do in an indirect or a direct way. Well, this dude was an incredible leader. He made an entire group of people hate another group of people and have some really horrible acts happen as a part of that. What he understood was control of the media, control of a voice, control of a narrative. And so if you've got anti-intellectuals and you've got a country or a group of people that aren't critical thinkers, when they get told something, it doesn't filter. If I was to tell either one of you something, you're going to filter it through a logical process to determine whether or not what I'm saying makes sense, is real, is true, if you're going to adopt that belief. But if you don't have the ability to think critically, whatever is told to you, you believe it. So when they say black people are lazy, and then they put all the images that they control that shows that black people are lazy, you believe it because it fits the narrative that you've been told, especially if you've been taught so many of the narratives that kids are brought up thinking, and this whole critical race theory and banning books and all of this. It's like there's a reason for that. It's not just random. We're talking about power and control. And Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power.
Love that book. Oh, dude, you just hit I love fucking Robert Greene. I love Robert Greene.
There you have it. Like you got to understand the game that you're playing. Like capitalism is monopoly, and we don't want people to have the same access and the same opportunity going around the monopoly board. So you just either don't teach people the rules of the game, you tell them that they're wrong or bad or whatever if they go around. All of these tactics and these tactics and techniques only work to an uneducated and or lack of critical thinking population. It wouldn't work with us. Like you couldn't have anybody just tell either one of us, that either one of you or myself, anything and just, I believe it. No matter what it is. But that comes from us being intelligent. It comes from us being able to think critically for ourselves, educated, and not even just formal education. It's just educating ourselves. We read, we learn, and we move through this world in a very different way. It's extremely fascinating to see all of this happen, and people just continue to go through the motions. Like, we could change this, y'all. You do realize we could change this today if we just stopped feeding this economic engine and we just made changes. The problem is we live in this world where it's everyone else's fault. So we look outside to blame. It's their fault. It's their fault. And they keep people divided for a reason. They know that if should black people and white people, poor black people, poor white people come together and realize it's not each other that's causing this, it's those guys. They know that. It's a wrap. It's over. The game is shut down. But they do such a good job.
And I'm sure that's the development of racism in America. That was specifically why, right? Because we had you know this. We had black and white slaves. They got together and realized, man, we're really getting fucked. And then a couple plantations got burned down. So then this is the genius, right? I forget who said it was. It was called the racial con, which was, oh well, we give poor white people some illusory status in the color of their skin. They're still economically the same as black people, but we say, but then they identify it. It masks class, right? Because then now they identify more with the top people and less with them. And then you set up slave patrols, which became which became the basis for modern policing. So that's like whenever anybody says like, oh, whenever people get on my case for shitting on cops, I go like, do you know how American policing started? It started as slave patrols. But no, I do have to go back to something you said. I do have to thank Republicans for one thing. I had no idea until they started yammering on and on about critical race theory, what it was. And then I started to look into critical legal studies, and I'm like, oh, that's why you don't want it taught, because it's like, it makes perfect sense. And once you look into it, you're like, it's not controversial. It's very obvious that there are, like, as you know, it's just the crux of it is just, there are built-in biases that reflect the biases of people who make the laws. That isn't controversial. That's why we have, who are these people making laws? People who went to Ivy League schools. What's a priority to them? Property rights. What is not a priority to them? What happens to black people? What happens to women? What happens to children? It's just, whether it's intentional or not, it's just not on their radar, right?
Yeah.
Just like for me, if I was making a law, it wouldn't be on my radar to be like, well, I got to make sure that I protect Elon Musk's property. That was not going to be on my radar. It's going to be, how can I set up, structures for publishing houses and homelessness. That's what's going to be on my radar. And that would be an innate bias for me, but they don't want that taught because, we have this myth of, we have the myth of, we have objective law, which is like, okay, but that's patently false, because if there was objective law, it wouldn't matter who was on the Supreme Court. You could just swap anybody in and out and they would just read it like a robot. Why does it matter then? If the law is objective, I can just swap in a robot if I want, and it's going to it's going to spit out the same result. It's not objective. That's why it matters. So sorry if
No, man, that's a great point. And it just speaks to the human element of this whole game that we're talking about. Like, I have biases. I'm a human being,
everybody does. Yeah.
Everybody does. And that becomes the problem, is we act as though we're not humans. Like, and I love the point. I wanted to make this, I'm still trying to figure out how to articulate it, but I want to make the same point. Like, if I, Jonathan Beatty, controlled the media, and I was focusing on Kentucky, what do you think if I'm going back home to my city of Hazard, am I going to focus on showing the good or the bad? That just depends on what I think about my hometown and the message that I want to communicate. If I loved it and I had a great experience, which I did, and I do love Hazard, where I'm from, I'm going to show the best of it. And maybe I show the balance in some way to show, hey, it's not all perfect, obviously, but I get to control the narrative. And that's just based on my feelings, my bias. If I go to a different country, if I've been to countries where you can't speak, it's not a priority to speak English. If you go down to Jamaica, or you go to even like a Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, like, there's tourist places that really focus on speaking our language. But if you go to a place where you don't speak the language, it's a whole different world. And so if you go to Bogota, for example, and you've only watched Narcos, then you're walking into it with like this image of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get killed. Unless you've done the research that says it's not that way. And most of us are too lazy to do the research. And they know that we're lazy. Like they know that we're not going to go through. So to your point earlier, do they know where the policing came from? Of course they don't. Because they're actually being protected and served. They're not on the other side of it. So there's no incentive to go figure that out. This is some of the most fascinating. Like I could think and talk about this stuff forever because it's just super fascinating. It's just human psychology and looking at ourselves and being honest. And we live in a very dishonest world. I think social media has given us the room to be even more dishonest, not just with other people, but with ourselves. Like we could tell ourselves stories and lie to ourselves, and therefore we lie to other people. It's just really, really interesting on how we're here. And 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we will determine whether it's the same or different. And right now, I don't know that it's going to be that much different unless we make it different. So yeah, it's very interesting. Just very interesting, man.
I mean, that's why ideally when the university runs in an ideal manner, it recognizes, right? I mean, again, I'm not saying it does run in an ideal manner, but when it does, when it works well, what it's intended to do is it recognizes, look, all of us, like you, have innate biases. We all have confirmation bias. We all want to be right. We're all going to search for. It's just we've got egos and all of that. And so what do? You structure a system that would pit, let's say, my ideas against contrary ideas, and then you bring students into the mix so that they can see me battling, let's say, my theories and my arguments against a whole bunch of others. And so it keeps me honest, it keeps that person honest, and the students can see a wide range. Now, I'm not saying it always functions that way, but like that is, like the university should not be a homogenous structure where it's everybody falls in line, right? That's totalitarian education, right? Like and like real education, as like democratic education, as Jason Stanley would call it, is one where you don't aim to venerate certain groups over others. You aim to provide as many perspectives as possible. And you structure it in a way where every member is at a disadvantage intellectually, so that, like, you know, I might have, you know, various biases and wanting to be right, but I'm going to be face pushback from somebody else, right? So if I'm trying to push, let me see, what kind of a view do I have? Like, okay, if I'm trying to push some, you know, view on X, then there's other people who have different ones that are going to push back at me and make me think about it. And then you bring the students into it, and then you don't push any particular view on them. I mean, this is how I teach. So, I mean, my day job is teaching, and like my job, as I see it, is never to say, this is what you believe, this is what you should believe. Right. My job is to say, here's this position represented honestly, because that's also part of critical thinking, is like, what's getting mixed up in the media too is we conflate identifying what the position is with the critique, where we immediately jump to the critique. Or like, no. Let's outline what the position is, what's the best, what are the best arguments for it, and then now let's tear it apart. Now let's see what the best arguments are for or against it. Now, who's right? You tell me. You tell me, right? I'm not going to tell you. You know, if we're having a debate on determinism and free will, I'm going to give you the best arguments for this position, then I'm going to give you the best counter arguments. You have to do the hard work of thinking it out yourself. So,
it's we could, man, if we understood how powerful we are as individuals and communities, as a collective, when we come together. There's a book called The Celestine Prophecy that talks about how one day in the future, instead of us dividing ourselves, we're going to unite. and this is ultimate, and how it's a fiction book, which I don't read a ton of, but it's essentially getting to how the world wraps up and how this whole thing ends. And it talks about how like people in different religions will go focus on what they love about each of the religions, and then not focus on the differences. And so they'll adopt the things that are great from each of the religions. We will realize that we don't have to be divided. Like this whole division thing is just man-made. We just made it. We didn't come into this world as an independent or Republican or a Democrat. Yep. We didn't come into this world as brown or black people. Like these are just labels that we gave ourselves. The whole thing is just what we as humans have done. None of it. We come into this whole thing with a clean slate, and we can clean it again. It's just going to take time. And I think the younger generation, maybe 2 or 3 generations from now, I think we'll get there. I think that there's going to be so many people who are searching for purpose. Excuse me. So many people that will put conscious capitalism over just traditional greed and greedy capitalism. I think that there are people, the younger generation doesn't care about the big house, the big car, they don't care about those things as much as the previous generations. I think they're more focused on life experiences, community, building with each other. I think, and it's reflected in social media on the good side, what we see in that. But, you know, it's just decisions and choices, man. We can choose today. I was telling back, I think it was Gucci that had like a blackface incident, and it was in the news for a few days, and people were boycotting for a few days, and then that was it. Gucci, I'm sure, knows that. I'm sure somewhere in their P&L, somewhere in their balance sheet, they've got money for this type of PR incident. But the reality is, if we really wanted to affect Gucci or Nike or Apple or Reebok or any of these companies, we just got to stop spending. The problem is, and Kanye West said, they made us hate ourselves and love their wealth. And essentially what he meant was we don't love ourselves enough to not spend it, because it's how we differentiate ourselves by these things. And I just think that in a couple of generations, we're not going to be having these conversations. Robots are going to be doing the work. We're going to be doing the artistic work we're supposed to be doing, using our gifts and our talents to serve one another. And hopefully everybody will be making livable wages. Life will be good. But until then, we're going to keep fighting this fight and just trying to put these ideas out there and hopefully attract the people who are interested in seeing the change. So I commend both of you for doing what you're doing and really having something to say. And I think it was Nipsey Hussle that said you can't really say anything until you know yourself, because you don't know what you want to say. Most of us have been trained to think what everyone else thinks. But once you understand yourself, you can have an opinion. You can create something because you have an opinion. You know yourself and what you're about. So thank you both. I appreciate it. And the same for me as well. Like I've done a lot of introspective self-work, especially in the last couple of years when the pandemic hit, just reading a ton of books, rewiring my brain. I don't know if it's neurons or neuroelectrons or something like that, where it's how you process different things and how your brain routes messages and information. I 100% can see the difference in me as a human being. And I'm hoping that these types of conversations, these types of platforms, what we're talking about can inspire people to realize that life doesn't have to be what they told you it has to be. There's an agenda. There's a system. We can break it. We can beat it. It's the Matrix 2.0.
Man, I got to tell you, you're like you're really inspiring. You have a lot more hope in the future, I guess, than I do. Although I'm way more pessimistic, but I commend you like 100%. Like, I mean, going back to what you said about, there's a lot of what people have to do is unlearn, right? So like there's an old Buddhist and Taoist saying, a scholar aims to learn something every day. A Buddhist monk aims to unlearn something. Well, what do you have to unlearn? You have to unlearn that, listen, race, it ain't real.
Yeah.
Money, it ain't real.
That's a fact.
It's just a social convention. A lot of this shit, countries, they're not real. They're just invisible lines. It's not real. And you just have to just go through the layers and like all of that social programming, realize how much of it is just bullshit. It's just culturally constructed, and and like
pretty much all of it.
Pretty much all of it. And it's like Doug Stanhope said, he's like, tradition is just dead people's baggage. Just dead people's baggage. Stop carrying it.
That's good.
No, of course, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yes and no. I mean, okay. Actually, returning to something else. So, like, here's a question that I'll have for you. So, suppose I bring you a kid, right? And this kid is bunctious, ADHD, and I say, all right, Jonathan, I want you to get this kid to read, right? Now, obviously, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but like, what would your steps be? Maybe what books would you recommend? And let's just say it's an average. It's like, third, fourth grader, right? I just bring a third, fourth grader, kind of a rabble rouser. I may or may not be speaking about myself.
Understood.
Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. So I bring this kid to you and I say, Jonathan, I want this kid to read. What books would you recommend, or how would you go about interrogating how to find out what books might be interested? He or she might be interested in, etc. Like, what would be your steps, methodology, whatever you want to call it?
Great question. And let me make sure I'm not giving y'all feedback. Can you hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing is to form a relationship in whatever capacity that I could. That goes beyond the reading. So I want there's you may have heard the phrase, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I firmly believe that. So I believe that it's about creating and fostering a relationship, which is going to be based on identifying what they like, what they want. What are your life goals? What do you want to be in life? What do you enjoy now? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? Really putting the focus on the child and making it about them, which I think, if I may, I think that's part of the issues that we have is it's about the parents or it's about the teacher. It becomes about self, and that ego you were talking about, Sebastian. That's what happens. We make it about us. Can't do that. Got to make it about the kid. And once the kid told me what they liked, if they like music, then let's go find some. Let's go to a concert. Before we even get to the books will be the last thing that I'm gonna get to. Let's go to a concert. Let's watch some YouTube videos. Let's go meet some artists. Let's learn about the things that you're interested in. And then I'm going to say somewhere along the line in this relationship, and I'm thinking almost like a big brothers, big sisters capacity. Okay, did you know that there's a book about the piano? I know you were talking about this piano the other day. Like, let me show you this book about it. I think you'd find it interesting. And then maybe read it together, or send it home and give them a couple of questions to come back with, just to have a conversation with. But I think that if you are at that point, third, fourth grade, and you're not a reader at that point, then it's much more important, in my opinion, to focus on the interest and then tailor the books to the interest. So that's what I would do. I would just be really intentional about forming the relationship and really honing in on what do they want to be. Oh, you want to be a nurse. Great. Did you know that such and such, who I know you're interested in, was a nurse? Oh, you didn't? Well, here's a book that talks about her. Or did you know that the first astronaut was here? Or did you know this? And just asking those questions and getting the mind thinking to where you spark the curiosity. I think curiosity is one of the most important faculties that we have, or an imagination that we have. And I think kids get that dulled over the course. I mean, you could talk to that same third or fourth grader. They've got an imagination that is wild.
Yep.
And all of us had it. when we were children. We could
Yep.
have a broom and we're thinking that we're riding on a horse or we're riding through the air. And we really believe we can live in that world where that's real. And that gets stripped away from us. So making sure that doesn't get stripped away from that child and showing them the magic that books can bring them would be the way that I would go about improving their reading and trying to help them become a learner.
Yeah, that's how do I say it? Like, that's in a way how I sustained on my own reading. Like, how do I put it? Like, I was so it's amazing because it's going to sound like I'm like, because if anybody has listened to interviews with Eminem, he says something very similar. But when I was doing it, I'm like, wow, this is just like me. Where, like, growing up, I mean, putting on a rap track, Biggie Smalls, Tupac, Snoop, NWA, like, that made me feel powerful, even when I wasn't, right? And Eminem said that too. Like, it made him feel powerful when he wasn't. And I remember thinking, these motherfuckers who really can put together words and they can make it flow. And I got to like dig into, like, listen. And also taught me a capacity of listening too, of like, I got to really listen to how they're doing things and like, wow, what are they doing with words and how are they bending them? And, how are they, and then that actually led to, my mother got me like a kid's encyclopedia set where I just read it all the way through. And then I was really fascinated by some of the like sea creatures and that were like extinct. And I'm like, wow, this is like something out of like fantasy or science fiction. And then somehow I stumbled upon the Goosebumps series and I was like, wow, this is great. I like that. And I stumbled upon, this is going to sound weird. I've told this to regular podcast listeners will probably cringe because I've said this enough, but I stumbled upon Moby Dick, and I loved the whole whaling stuff. And it was just a chain of things that involved commitment to language, whether it be the spoken, whether it be spoken word in the form of rap, or just otherwise dry information, me being totally enthralled by just reading the whole encyclopedia and then figuring out, wow, I really like some of these prehistoric creatures and I want to know more about whaling. And I was like, oh, Moby Dick's about whaling. So, I want to know more about the sea stuff. Well, this is about the sea stuff, right? I read it. And then realizing, oh yeah, like, I think it was somebody recognized that like I was really into like Chucky, the movie, that. Yeah. And they're like, well, maybe you're a little too young for that, but hey, wait, check out these Goosebumps books. You might like them.
Yeah.
And then I was sold. Like I was like, oh, I love it. And then you graduate to like Stephen King and all that. But I mean, that was my trajectory. Maybe my question would be both to Jonathan and Cody. What was your trajectory? So Cody, what was yours, and Jonathan, what was your sort of reading trajectory? So I don't just drone on. I have a habit of that. I apologize.
That's how we're working on it still. Yeah, mine. I'll just go first again. Mine was pretty much the same for the most part. I mean, I wrote about a particular instance when I was younger with my father, who was one of the few instances when he was sober enough to talk to me. We was watching a movie together, and it was called what was the movie? It escapes me. But anyways, it's
in your book. Yeah, it's in your book. You mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the movie now for some reason. But anyway, it's got Anthony Hopkins that gets lost in the woods, and he's like this professor, I think, or I don't remember now. But anyway, he gets challenged to guess what's on another side of like this old Indian motif like paddle, and he guesses correctly. And then we watched the movie together. My dad was like, "Why do you think he knows what that is?" And I was like, "I don't know." He says, "Because the reason so that was like the spark for me. So I was like, well, I want to know a lot, and like, I also want my father's respect. So that my dad seemed to like respect that character. So I was like, I want to do that too. So yeah, I read through the whole Encyclopedia Britannica collection we had, the dictionary, anything in the house that I could get a hold of, and and then Goosebumps and Fear Street, Stephen King, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, that parental impact is key, and that's I mentioned earlier. My dad was a minister, so he was always reading for the most part was reading the Bible. But my mom was a voracious reader, so she was reading everything. So between the two, I got my reading habits from both of them. It was just normalized. Which going back to the point we were talking about earlier, there are millions and millions of kids who've never. A, there's millions of kids who don't have a book in their home, and B, who've never seen an adult read, like outside of a classroom, never seen it. So it's not normal. So that was what happened, if you will, with me. My favorite book, I think the book that really spoke to me as a child was The Little Engine That Could. I was the third of fourth kids, third of four kids, and I always got left out with my big cousins, and like my big brother would always be going to them, and I always felt like they didn't believe that I could do what they were doing, but I did. I knew if I just kept going, and I still feel that way right now. And just a mindset of I think I can. I believe that I can, and that belief is what's allowed me to have a fairly successful life thus far. But trajectory, started with just the normal kids book, watched my parents read, got into sports books. I was a big race car fan back in the day. So reading anything that I could about racing, anything I could about sports, anything I could about the people that I admired. Like at that time, big Will Smith fan, big Tupac fan, Biggie fan, so I'm reading about people. And so even now, if I think about what I read, funny enough, I've never thought about it, but that's essentially it now. I find people that are fascinating, ideas that are fascinating, concepts that are fascinating, and then I get locked in. I just go on just a flurry of reading. So that's been my trajectory in thus far. And mentioned earlier as well, in the pandemic, I read more in a 3-month span than I probably had read for the prior 3 years before in total. I just went in, just changing, just learning. And it wasn't just the pandemic. So another part, and something that I'm happy about that's happened with I Love Books is Kobe Bryant was an inspiration to a lot of people, and the way that time happened with him passing away, and then the pandemic hitting and people being locked in. I just started to ask myself, what is the purpose? Like, what are we doing here? Mm-hmm. We're all here. What are we here for? And I think about how much he had in the form of resources that didn't protect him or his daughter or anyone else on that chopper. So it's like, it's not a money thing. Like, money can't protect you. You know, he was super successful, did all the things, and yet here we are. And my father passed in a tragic car accident in 2000. So accident, 5 days later, he passed away. So it really resonated with me when Kobe hit, because I know how instant, like that instant change of life is different. So it just inspired me, man. And I knew that I didn't have the tools, all the information that I needed. So I went to go find it, and I went super, super hard. So still reading those types of books now, and every once in a while flipping a fiction book, but for the most part, I'm still sticking to the nonfiction. Now, my question to y'all: what do you prefer? Do you prefer fiction, nonfiction, combination of both?
Cody, I'll let you answer. I'll answer last this time because I've been droning on. So
yeah, for me,
never that, man. Speaking thoughts.
I try to kind of stagger between fiction and nonfiction. So I'll read a fiction book, then next book will be a nonfiction, and then keep going on that. But for the most part, it does skew mostly toward nonfiction.
Yeah, for me, it tends to be ideally, I try to have a novel going, a short story collection going, and a nonfiction book going. And a healthy amount of poetry as well. I mean, you probably know this, but I mean, reading fiction has the benefit of increasing empathy for others, right? I mean, that's something that books can do that movies really can't, is you can really get inside a character's head if done right and sort of see how they think, right? The real masterpieces. And it also lets you, it can also, how do I say this? It can also be more true than nonfiction because it elucidates bigger truth, right? So like to go back to like if I can make a recommendation, the next fiction book you read, Tender as the Flesh, right? It's going to elucidate points about problems. It's going to have a subtext of a critique of capitalism, though that's not all it's about. People want to say, oh, it's just about, no. Or they want to say, oh, it's an argument for veganism. Again, that's maybe not, right? But it's a kind of an underlying, you get to see, I mean, you'll see, it'll leave you thinking about how people are, and I guess the best way that I could say it is, it'll give you it's a clever way of introducing you to totalitarian ways of thinking. Would you agree with that, Cody? Kind of how one acts or would typically act in a totalitarian regime, using a metaphor of a slaughterhouse. Would that, am I on the same page as you, Cody?
I think so. I mean, that's pretty much my understanding of the book, was the fact that it's really sort of it's more of a critique of fascism in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I thought so, because I mean, fascism isn't an alternative to capitalism. It's capitalism in a most violent form it can possibly take. And then the book basically will leave you with we'll leave you with the question: can power and empathy coexist?
Yeah, it'll fuck you up though. Like when you read it, like you're going to be entering a world in which, like, it's like, wow, like it's definitely makes one of my top. It's in my top 5 easily. I mean, when I read that book, I heard good things, but I didn't know how good it really was. So yeah, I mean, it can elucidate that kind of sort of deeper that. It sort of provides a lubricant for different commentary on stuff, right? And especially now, like we're seeing a resurgence in the publishing industry, which, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it's done out of any kind of altruism, but I mean, at least it's a resurgence in seeing like really great representations from like Native American or American Indian people, depending on how they want to be called, Black authors, Asian. So like if I'm linking, like on my to be read list, I've got something called I haven't read it, a Western called The Thousand Crimes of Ming Su by Tom Lin, an Asian American, writing a Western. I mean,
love it.
You know, fucking cool. It looks good. It's supposed to be like really violent and like, I mean, of course, it's a Western. It's a gritty Western. We have somebody like Stephen Graham Jones, right? Something who is just a super nice guy, like into super nerdy into slashers, and so, and he's presents his work in the framework of like contemporary American Indian life, right? So like if you read The Only Good Indians, you'll see his perspective on what contemporary American Indian life is, right? Because like, and we all envision, right? We all have this sort of stereotype of, the American Indian with the headdress and all of that. And he just doesn't do it. He's like, no, it's going to be your neighbor down the street, or it's just going to be somebody and what problems they face.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really great, and I think and even though some of the prose, I would say, is a little bit, I'm not trashing on, I'm just saying this is his style, takes a bit of getting used to. Even though the prose can be a bit getting used to, he subverts this interesting. So The Only Good Indians is about these four guys. Basically, the crux of it is, I'm sorry, I'm droning on again. I'm sorry. Like these four Native Americans that go out years ago and they poached a bunch of elk, right? And then it comes back to haunt them later on in their life. That's the essence of it. But when I read that, I thought, that's brilliant, right? Because, of course, as we're all taught, right, and this was probably true back in, hundreds of years ago, about respecting the land and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What he does is he subverts it and says, no. Let's not have this kind of mythical narrative of, American Indians. Like, they can be pieces of shit too. They can also be pieces of shit. Like, which I think is nice, because I think somebody had said, like, when you tokenize or when you try to make one group on a pedestal, right, which is probably done in good faith,
Mm-hmm.
it denies them their humanity, because it says, it's like, no, it's like white, black, whatever, like, it's going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? There's going to be good, there's going to be some real pieces of shit, there's going to be some in the middle, but and so that's also what it can do. If I met an American Indian child and I was there, said, hey, what should I read? And I would say, well, do you like horror? And if they said yes, I would say, here you go, read Stephen Graham Jones. He's an American Indian. He writes from that perspective. Like, he says, I'm embracing this perspective. Or if I meet, some, let's say Chinese kid comes up to me and says, hey, what should I read? I go, hey, what do you think about Westerns? Do you kind of like them? I might recommend Tom Lynn's book, right? And so I think that's also where fiction is important, is that it's like, it makes you think also, if they can do it, I can do it. It's, sorry, I'm droning on. Cody, jump in. I keep violating my own not droning on.
No, that's fine. Fiction in particular is like an empathy generating machine, really. So
that's deep. Yeah, I'd never thought about it. And funny enough, my favorite book of all time, a book that I've read for the last at least 8 years, at the beginning of every year in January, is called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And the point that you just made, it makes you believe that if they can do
wonderful writer. Yeah, wonderful writer.
Absolutely. Makes you hit it on the head, man. It makes you believe if they can do it, I can do it. And I read that book at the beginning of my journey back in 2014 when I first moved back to Kentucky. And I needed to read it, even though I didn't know, because it gave me the preview of what was going to happen in my life and all of the good that's going to come and the bad. And the message was, if you keep going, the treasure is yours. It's already there. You don't have to do anything except find it. And you find it by keep going, by continuing to go on your journey and discover your personal legend. So, and then I mentioned the Celestine Prophecy earlier, another one of my favorite books, which is also fiction. So I don't read it. I don't read fiction now. Based on this conversation, I'm realizing it's not enough, which I didn't really consider. So I'm going to add one. I put all the books that you recommended in my browser, so I'm going to have those ordered and sent here soon. But I'm going to add some more fiction to the repertoire. I appreciate that feedback, man. That's to both of you. That's extremely helpful. I've never thought about it in that capacity. And once again, just to bring it all back together, even in telling you that I'm going to read fiction, I've still got to find the right fiction books for me. That's key. That's the most critical part of it. And to anyone listening, watching, like, I gotta understand. You're hearing me in real time. I know I need to read this type of genre, but I still have to find the right thing. So again, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Got some good recommendations. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I mean, and people, when they go into anything, it's, trial and error, right? So don't just, there's a lot of things that I wanted to like that it just wasn't for me, right? It's an ADHD thing, right? So as much as I want to like, for instance, epic fantasy, I can't. I just can't do it. It just does not hold my attention. And then I take lessons. As a fiction writer myself, I take lessons on when I read what I like and what I don't, right? So I love short chapters. Love them. And so I'm reading a book right now, Helen Phillips' The Need. And what's great about that is I'm about halfway done, and so far none of the chapters have been over 3 pages.
Wow.
Most of them are like 1 or 2 pages, and then it's like, and it's a great book for me because if I'm stressed or whatever, I can just be like, oh, I can quickly just do this and like whatever. Which is not to say I'm not going to read someone like Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian with 30-page chapters, but I'm going to have to really get into the mindset of it. And as far as like elucidating the human condition, there's nobody better, I would say, than Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who this cat doesn't get recognized enough, like, before. He sort of provided the intellectual framework for bringing down the Soviet Union, right? You hear all this nonsense about, it was Reagan, it was this, the Pope, fuck all that. Like they just maybe they just tipped already leaning right. It was a lot of internal decay, and who caused that? It was, there's 3 volumes, the Gulag Archipelago that he's got, brutal. Describing the gulags, because this cat did 11 years in the gulag. And when he was in the gulags, it's very self-reflective, and he produced the Gulag Archipelago. He produced, I'm looking right now at In the First Circle. And these are huge books, but they will keep you. And you will find so much wisdom from being in such an extreme state that he was in, this is why Dostoevsky is so impactful, right? Also spend time in prison camps, right? And you come out of that, if you're reflective, and especially now with like the pandemic, right? You've come out more reflective, is that if you're given that time in an extreme condition to just sit back and be like, what am I doing? Right? And certainly they had it much worse. Whether you're in a Siberia, that's much worse. I'm not trying to minimize them, but just if you're put in that kind of space where it's like, all right, my daily routine is broken. What's going on with my life? Like, why did I end up in the gulag? Or why am I here now? You start to question that and think. And one of the good things about the pandemic is that a lot of people are like, hey, I don't need to go back to the office. The office is irrelevant, right? So like a lot of employers, you ever read these articles? They're hilarious. I read these for fun, where there's tons of articles on people trying to theorize, why don't, what's with people not wanting to return to an office? Because it sucks.
It's pretty simple.
This is not a complicated problem. Like,
It's not.
like, why wouldn't you want to return to an office where you can get all your work done in 30 minutes, spend the next, 7 hours making memes while avoiding your dickhead coworkers and your fuckhead boss? Why would you not want to go back to that paradise?
Right. Yeah. Especially since you're not paying for $5 gas to drive 30 or 45 minutes to go do those things in that said office. Yeah, man. A great resignation, and you made a really, really brilliant point. And when you said it, I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I feel like that's what happened. And then you brought it up, which is time. We've been talking about this whole system and thing. That's part of it. It's to eat up our time, man. I mean, our time is our greatest asset. It's the one thing we cannot get back. I cannot get back 10 minutes ago. It's just gone. And so if they keep us just on this wheel of time, and I think that's what happened. So many people, apparently millions of people said, yeah, this ain't it. Because you start projecting your life into the future and you're saying, do I want to do this for the next 30 years of life? And if the answer is no, then you got to start making a plan. And then you just get to work. And I don't think that we as Americans in particular, I don't know if we've ever had it in the world. It would seem like it'd be one of the very few times for anybody that's living right now where we just had so much time in our own home, not time somewhere else, not time responsible for something. I mean, I was working from home. I didn't go. I had so much time. And I think about like the power of choices and decisions. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of people that were saying, hey, we're in a pandemic. Don't do anything. Be lazy. Do nothing. Enjoy. So on and so on. And I think a lot of people took like, hey, just do nothing. Just be unproductive as possible. And I'm thinking, not this guy. Like, I'm going to be in optimal productivity mode, not for my company, but for myself and my self-development as a human. And it gave that time to reflect. And that reflective, that introspective, just opportunity to think and really just think with so much time. No driving to an office, no chit-chatting at an office, no working in this office, and then driving back home. None of that. I just wake up and do what I want to do. Oh my gosh, this is the life. Why would anybody want to? So yeah, Elon Musk, I think to you, the point that you made earlier, I think he just said to everybody, yeah, y'all got to come back into the office like now. So we'll see how that works out for him. But on the other hand, it won't. Yeah, I'm sure they'll have 20% of their people at a minimum resign and go work at some other company that pays them more money or doing whatever it is that they do. So
yeah, I mean, the rich people, I mean, it's funny. The rich people think that they're smart because they're rich, right? When it's like not. When it's always funny to me because, like, and I had to point this out to people whenever they praise somebody like Steve Jobs or whatever. I'm like, they're like, oh, Steve Jobs, he created the iPhone. And I go, but did he tell other people to do it? Oh, Elon Musk made the car. No, actually, he actually bought out that company, Tesla. He actually bought them out ruthlessly. He came from, his father was an emerald, dealer or whatever? An emerald mine. And it's like, so it's always like, yeah, but did he do it? Is he sitting there working on the thing? No, it's telling other people to do something, right? And so like these rich people think like, oh, I did this. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't do it. You had thousands of people do it for you, and then you took all the credit, which is that's one of the laws in the fucking 48 laws. It's a shrewd law: is get other people to do the work for you, take all the credit, right? Okay, well, I know the game. I know I know the scam now.
There you have it. The game.
Yeah, but what was I going to say? I was going to say something that I thought was going to be insightful, and then I forgot. It's oh shit, I forgot. Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you get older, I don't know how. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
just turned 39 last month.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna turn 38 in a week or two, I forget. Cody's roughly my. And when you get older, you really realize like just how precious time is, right? You're like, the clock is ticking, and you kind of start to think, it's hard enough to become good at one thing. So be careful what you pick, and then really hone in on that. I mean, it goes back to like, but then when you find it, really hone in on that is what I would say. I don't know if this is what you do, but like, again, to return to this line always stuck out for me from when Mike Tyson was interviewing Eminem, where he goes, I was never really good at anything. So when I found out that I was kind of good, kind of decent at writing rhymes, he said, I just honed in on that. He goes, I'm not really good at anything else. So I just zoned in, just focused, and that's what I did. And so maybe that's the best advice, or not advice, but teacher that the pandemic can teach also is find out what you're halfway decent at and then just go for it.
Yep.
Anyway, Cody, what do you have? God, I always feel like an asshole. I monopolize the time. So Cody, chime in.
No, I mean, I agree with everything you said, really. And actually, to kind of circle back to what Jonathan was talking about, I mean, when trying to find the right book, I mean, trying to select the right book is almost as important as reading the right book itself.
Oof.
Because reading isn't where it can be a huge time investment. So I mean, you gotta make sure you're getting a good ROI on that. So.
Yeah. That's a great point. And to the effect of choosing the right thing, I just finished a book a couple of months ago titled The Second Mountain. And it's essentially about how a lot of us go up this mountain chasing this thing that we were taught that we wanted when we were kids. For me, it was, I grew up in a single wide trailer with 6 people in it in the 80s, man. So if you can go back to those times and you're familiar with what a trailer looked like, and it's like it was not the most pleasant of experiences. And I knew that I wasn't going to have that.
That's where I grew up too.
Hey, man,
that's where I grew up too.
Respect, bro. Like it's and that was my first mountain. It was get into corporate game, make a bunch of money, live this life, travel the world, do those things. And when I did it, I wasn't even 30 years old by the time I had got to the top of what I had set out to do. And you realize this isn't what I want. Like, this isn't the life that, I want to live. It's not as meaningful as it could be. This isn't what I was built for. This isn't what I'm best at. I can do something else other than make these companies all this money. And I'm grateful for this skill and I'm grateful for the life, but this isn't it. So you go down that mountain and you got to go through the valley to find the other mountain. And then you start climbing up that one. So that's the second mountain. And I feel like that's what my journey has been. And that's where I'm at now, climbing up this second mountain to become who I know I'm supposed to become. And I'm really hopeful that a lot of people follow the same advice. I would say advice that you were just saying a moment ago, which is find that thing. I really believe that we all have gifts. We all have something that we just naturally do that we are good at and we enjoy. When you find that thing, we live in a world where you can monetize it. You can make a living off of it. And maybe you don't make a $2 million a year living off of it. But what's better than waking up in the morning and doing what you love and being able to pay the things and live a good life? Like, that to me is the ultimate. I've worked with people who are multimillionaires, at early 30s and are miserable because they hate what they do, but they're afraid to leave the money and they don't know. They haven't tapped in. They haven't used that time to read those books and explore that information, to do the mining of their mind in themselves so that they understand what their gift is. And most of us know when we're kids, we get it. And then going back to the point about that imagination getting stripped out. That's what we see. We see that gift stripped out, because for me, as an example, I was very creative. My undergraduate degree was in marketing and management. I loved thinking outside of the box. I write rhymes. Like, I've made music. I have a mixtape called Book Music that I want to put out. Like, I enjoy words. I enjoy talking. So all of that. But then I went into this field called finance, where creativity and finance led you in jail. Like, I'm not trying to be Bernie Madoff. I'm trying to live out here. So I can't be creative. And I spent over a decade just using that logic, no creativity. And I could see how it put me back to where I want to go, but I recognize it. And now I'm doubling down on what I truly do believe my gift is, which is the ability to articulate and use words, like the ability of speech. Very similar in my mind to a rapper or a singer or somebody that uses words to make a living, but more in the inspirational speaking. Like, I want to stand in front of people and tell them what we're talking about. Like, you are capable, and really help them believe what we know to be true. Going back to the point, none of this is real. It's just made up. It's the limitations are based on our decisions to be limited and limiting ourselves, not because it's real. And I believe that is my true calling in life. And once you look back, it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure with each of you can look back and say, oh yeah, I'm doing what I'm doing now, or these are the things that I'm really good at. And when I was a kid, I could see the connection between, or what inspired me. I'm sure that seeing my dad in front of people every week seeped into my subconscious. Like, I know I can get in front of people and talk to them. And we're shaped to be who we are for a reason, and it's to serve and help other human beings. Like, the whole purpose of this game of life, in my opinion, is to find what we're just really good at. If you're a writer, write. If you're a baker, bake. If you're a singer, sing. Whatever it is that you love to do, do it. People will find you. You will attract those people. You will find them. They will find you. And there's no better time to do it than when you have these things called the internet. I'm in Atlanta. I don't know where each of you are right now, but it's not here. You're not in the room. So we can connect with people on levels that we could not have a very short amount of time ago. So these are the conversations, and these are the thoughts that can change the world. And I genuinely believe that. I believe that when human beings realize that we are the world, who is the world? It's humans. So how do you change the world? You change humans. How do you change humans? Humans have to change themselves. And if we all change ourselves to become the best version of ourselves, well, the world becomes much better because we are much better. And that's the narrative that I want to push to the people. And like I said, I respect everyone in the literacy space. I respect every job, every role that there is, because it's needed. You mentioned a rich history earlier, and we must keep that history going on all facets and in all spaces. So extremely, extremely grateful, man. I had no idea, we're having a conversation. It's like, oh, I know two really intelligent guys. They're just, out here doing the work. So extremely, extremely grateful. It's super cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think also, like, there's something, like, going to what you said, a couple things, like, to piggyback off of that is, like, I mean, I borrow more from Eastern thought than Western, right? And so I don't know if you ever heard the phrase, nothing fails like success.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to not take ourselves too seriously, because I think a lot of people think, well, I want to get to the top, or I want to be the best, and then they don't realize what comes after that, right? So are you familiar with the Buddhist cycle of birth and death, which is just a metaphor, which I would consider just a metaphor for states of mind?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, there's two. Yeah, well, there's I forget, 5 or 6 realms. I have to look it up, but there's to contrast this. There's the Deva realm and there's the Naraka realm. The Deva realm is like the most happy, the happiest people, and the Naraka realm is the most miserable, right? And this is cyclical, right? And we find ourselves in. There's also the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm. So when we're angry, we're in the, I forget what realm it's called. When we're really wanting, we're in the hungry ghost realm with these people represented as big bellies and real tiny mouths. But a Buddha, one who is woken up, is not represented on that wheel. They're either outside of it or they're inside of it. Why? They realized something really interesting, which is everything that goes up comes down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you achieve the highest levels of success, the only way you can go is down into the Naraka realm, which is the most miserable, right? I mean, I think like to borrow like a rap phrase from one of Lil Wayne's verse, right? Life is like such a fucking roller coaster, then it drops, right? And I think a lot of people, they don't realize that. They think, oh, I'm going to achieve this maximum success without realizing the big costs of that, right? And the
100%.
problems it brings. And then it brings, I mean, like you said, how, millionaires are so miserable. Well, there's many psychological studies that have shown so people say money can't buy happiness. True and false. True in the sense of you're not going to get ultimate kind of equanimity and sublimity and all of that. But it does reduce stress, obviously, right? Anybody who's grown up poor knows that the last fucking thing they want to do is deal with these government bureaucracies and, living paycheck to paycheck. And so what they find is they can do, they say, like, for instance, in the US, right, like the ideal income would be, let's say 70, 80,000. Other countries might be higher or lower, but you find that. And then there's diminishing returns above that. But also, when you really exceed that, you inherit a whole bunch of other problems, right? Mm-hmm. You have people who are, this is why people say, like, do you want to be rich? No, I don't want to have bodyguards. I don't want to be able to not go into a restaurant if I want to, not be, be swarmed. But for instance, people would say, well, that's why if, like, I wouldn't want Eminem's life. Why the fuck would I want his life? I mean, I respect the music. He's one of the best out there. Or like, Kanye put out good shit. Or like, but they can't go anywhere. They got to spend millions on bodyguards. People are constantly, after them. That's a miserable way to live. Like, I'm cool.
Yeah, it seems so bad, bro. So bad.
Yeah. I mean, and so then it actually has a detrimental impact. So then you're just, at that point, you're trading one set of problems for another one,
Yep.
And to piggyback off something else about keeping the heritage, have you read about keeping sort of, literary heritage, whatever it may manifest itself? Have you read Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451?
451?
Yeah. A lot of people think that book is about book burning. If you look at the subtext, it's also about something else, deeper. Because the guy's wife, now this is written, I forget when it was written, a long time ago. She's constantly hypnotized by this flickering box, the TV, right?
Yeah.
Ray Bradbury. And at the very end, right, it ends with all of these people who have memorized, the stories, and they carry it around with them. And so it's more about what he saw, 50, 60, I forget how many years ago that book was written. I had to look it up again, maybe 70 years ago. He saw an encroachment of technology and ignorance on our ability to keep this kind of, it's almost depressing because like you want to, how do I say it? Sometimes I'll make a reference of somebody I think everybody should know just because they've had a massive influence on culture, and it'll just fly, just land flat. Like I was once teaching a class where I used a Bob Dylan reference. Now, you can like his music or not like it, but to not know who Bob Dylan is, to be an American and not know who nobody knew who Bob Dylan was. I'm like, wait, you don't know who Bob Dylan is? A massive influence. I mean, like I was just so shocked. And then I think I mentioned the Count of Monte Cristo, just for using it as an example. Nobody had heard of that, and I was like, what's going on here? Like I mean, that's also why literacy is so important. Is just to not know, and I think technology is a lot to blame for, like the short attention span, right? Because it's like you Snapchat or the kids Snapchat or whatever, and it's all boom, 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 and like you had mentioned earlier, right? Maybe something go trend on Twitter for like 5 minutes, and then they'll forget about it, and move on to something else. Whatever, move on. And it's heartbreaking in a way because it's like, if people don't know like massive influence, like who's had massive influences. Okay, if people don't know, for instance, like massive white people influences, like how are we going to expect them to know like the massive impact that like black folks have made on culture, right? Like the defibrillator. I tell people like, do you know the story behind the defibrillator?
I don't think so.
I forget who made it. It was a black guy made it, an inventor. And it's a sad story. I actually did learn about this in school, so hopefully I don't get this wrong, but made it, invented the defibrillator. It came time when he needed it, and they wouldn't use it on him because he was black.
Oh wow! Yeah, not surprising, but yeah,
not surprising. But like he invented it, he needed it, and they wouldn't use it on him. But sorry,
that's man. I mean, there's so many stories I would imagine that are in there, and imagine how much we don't know. Like that's the other part, man. Like imagine how much we just don't know, and how much was erased or withheld or any of that. Like information is so critical, but when you have gatekeepers of information, that's when it becomes really dangerous. And when you have people, and this is why I think the whole ban books movement, if you will, lack of a better word, is so egregious. It's like you're controlling what people can access and learn, which keeps them limited in their beliefs, keeps them limited in their capacity and their thinking. But once again, not a surprise, just disappointing. And unfortunately, going back to the attention span, two things with that. One is part of the reason why people don't want to read books is because it's boring. Like, and if you're not a reader and you're mid 30s or early 30s or up, then it's going to be much more difficult for you to become a reader now, just because the entertainment factor is so appealing. Like
there's so many things vying for your attention. Yeah.
So many things. Attention. There's a rapper out of the West Coast, out of the Bay Area. His name is Rex Life Raj, and he made a line that I thought was brilliant, which is attention is the new cash. And I 100% agree with that statement. Yeah. And everything wants our attention because they know that attention pays. So how do you get people and this goes back to the next point, how do you get people to want to read? If they could either turn on a movie, I can turn on Netflix, I can get on my apps, I can spend hours just wasting. We don't even know it. We're wasting time, and we have no idea that we're just wasting it. Just giving. Gosh, oh, it's so crazy, man. But
I mean, but that's the business model. But that's the business model of like Netflix and like YouTube, all of that is it's not enjoyment, it's engagement. It's to keep watching, keep doing, keep clicking.
Absolutely.
That's the business model. But actually, okay, I don't mean to monopolize, but there was one thing I wanted I wanted to get your opinion on this. Do you know who Daryl Davis is?
The name sounds familiar, but I also feel like it may be a more common name. So Daryl Davis.
Yeah, he's this black piano player, right? That kind of through a series of events, I don't want to go through the whole story, but series of events got into sort of infiltrated the KKK and has gotten like 300 some people out of it. Just an extraordinary individual.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what he says, right? So he says that this is a controversial point. And I wanted to see what you think about this. He says that he doesn't like that he's against Black History Month. Here's why. And I want to see what your opinion of this is. He says we relegate Black history just to February, which ironically, shortest month of the year. And he says, and you end up talking about the same groups of people, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. He says a better way of doing it, he says, would be to incorporate it year round. He goes, not that we shouldn't talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and all these people, but what about all of the, Black inventors, people who made, impacts on medicine? Like, for instance, so open heart surgery, for example, that was made possible from what's the movie called? It was the movie's called Something the Lord Made or something. It's got a real corny title. I hate the title, but it's something like that. And it was about this white surgeon who there's this other Black guy who wants to be a doctor, but he has to go through a whole bunch of courses, undergrad courses that he can't afford, and he's got a family. So he just becomes a janitor, but he reads up on medicine. Long story short, because of him working with this other doctor, but let's make no mistake, it was the other guy, right? It was this. I hate saying it. The Black. I should look up his name so I'm not don't sound like an asshole, but for lack of a better name, whoever it was. Yeah, I know, but it's just sounds so stupid. But like, because of him, we have open heart surgery. We never hear about it. Like, you can have open heart surgery because of this Black guy. You can have a defibrillator because of a Black inventor. You could have so many, and you don't hear about those people. Like how drastically our lives have been improved intellectually, artistically. I mean, do we ever learn about Du Bois? One of the most, I think he was the first, wasn't he the first Black person to graduate from, I think, Princeton, I think he was the first. You never hear about him. One of the most important people in early African American thought, right? And so I think Daryl Davis's point was just, okay, well, you hear about people like Washington and all of this all throughout the year, and you remember that, but then you relegate just a few Black figures to 1 month, and then you're just forgotten about till next year when it should just be integrated all throughout, right? And what he would say, and what I would say is like, Black history is just American history. Same with Native American history, with Asian American history. That's just American history. It's not Black history. It's just American history, people.
Yeah. Well, and that's, in my opinion, part of the reason why the CRT argument is in existence. So you got to think about, like, one, I agree for sure. And there's really, it's twofold in my opinion. We learn about the people that they want us to learn about, and they frame them in the way that they want us to believe. So Dr. King was not a very popular man during his time. He was not beloved like he is now. Same with Muhammad Ali. He was also not beloved as they are looked at now. They don't
even in the Black community, wasn't it like 50? Like it was over 50% of Black people actually did not support Martin Luther King during his time. Yeah.
So what's the incentive of putting him as the poster child of Black History Month? Well, hey, Black people, this is how you should act. It should, especially when you take in context when all of this started happening decades ago. It's like, be peaceful, don't cause any problems, and be like him. You see, like, we celebrate him because he was nonviolent. He was kind. It's like, no, that's not. Like, he's got content about him out too. They're in books. You could read them, and if you would do that, you would know that's not the story, but that's the narrative. And going back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, you control that narrative. You control who we hear about. So that's the first thing.
Well, and they forget, and by venerating one person, they forget that all the people that came before him, right? Sure. Like, he wasn't let's not pretend he was the inventor of sort of Black liberation theology, right? Let's not, like, I mean, there was
not at all
many people before him, and they also conveniently forget that he was anti-capitalist, anti-Vietnam War, and very pro-poor people. And he also said that the civil rights movement was just the first step. And they also conveniently forget that when he was assassinated, he was at a poor people's rally, not a civil rights rally. Because he says, okay, this is all great. Now, we got civil rights. This is fine. But now we have to talk about class. That dirty word that we don't like to talk about, that Republicans hate in this country, talking about class. They just want to say, no, the problem is class, motherfuckers. Like, that's where he was assassinated. But they like to, that's why it's so funny to me when Republicans are like, Martin Luther King would have been a Republican. The fuck world are you living in? What world are you living in? That he would have been a Republican? Are you out of your fucking mind? He would have hated you. What are you talking about? Like,
that's funny. Yeah, and that's part of it, man. And it's very fascinating because, for the people who are uninterested in the truth, they're not going to go seek that information out. It just fits into the narrative that they want to believe, and therefore that narrative is reality. But yeah, I'm aware that that's not the case. And the other part of why they want to do it in that way is if you start telling these young Black kids that their ancestors were more than slaves, and you start having these conversations about the contributions that Black people have made in America, in addition to the world, but in America in particular, you start to change their belief system. Now you're starting to download that information, and not just the Black kids, but it's the white kids too, because they're going to see, hey, I'm not by default superior because of my skin tone. There are other people who've done great things that don't have my skin tone that I benefit from today, that my ancestors have benefited from. And there's a book called The Magic of Believing, one of my favorites, and it's very similar to what we're saying. It's a belief system. Like, our beliefs are extremely important. It drives everything. So if you have Black Future Month and Black History Month, or you just integrate it into the total curriculum, well, now you've got CRT and you've got real history being taught. And there's a danger to the system if that system is abolished. Like, if you really start teaching kids that Black people were more than slaves, and it was more than just a president freeing the slaves, Jim Crow and all, like, if you really get deeper into it, then you're going to change the belief system of all kids, and that's going to change the world in a way that we don't even know how it would affect us. So that's my opinion on why they want it to be that way. And it's very unfortunate.
Well, and people don't understand just how powerful any group of people can be. But like, if you really study history, it's amazing to find out that during that relatively short period of Reconstruction in the South, there was something like 14 like black people elected to public office in the South. They were doing fine. Like when I teach certain stuff like this, like I say, like the reason that we have the conditions of like black people the way they are is because we didn't just leave them alone. Like, just leave them alone. And again, going to the CRT stuff, you'd understand something like why there are ghettos. It was government policy. So for everybody who's like, FDR, he was really great. He opened up the housing market for white people. Black people were explicitly left out of that. Nobody has to believe me. They can go back and look at who could get loans and who couldn't, and then you create redlining and
redlining for sure.
It's like that really great article, like an article that I've taught before, by Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Case for Reparations. Oh, such a great article. He goes through all of this. But it's just like, it's like people, like the reason that, people can say, oh, inner city crime and all of that. And it's like, but you don't understand, like, if you were to just leave people alone, any group of people, just let them do their thing, they're going to be fine. But they're not going to be fine if you're always fucking with them and you're putting legal barriers in their way and you've got fucking lynch mobs coming after them. Then they're going to not be okay.
Yeah, and bombs being dropped, and fires of businesses being businesses being burned down, by folks that don't have any punishment. Like, all of this stuff is by design, and anyone who doesn't know it either wants to remain ignorant or just is too lazy or too apathetic to even search. Like, it just fits a narrative that people want to believe, which is black people are where they are because black people are inferior, not because your great grandfather was lynching, burning, raping, drowning. Like, this is what was actually happening. But I know this information. Y'all may know this information, but why do we know it versus other people? Well, y'all seem like two pretty good dudes to me. Sounds like a great conversation to me. And that's what comes with the territory. And it doesn't mean that you did anything. It doesn't mean that y'all are bad or your ancestors were just evil humans. Like, that was the time that they were living in. This is the process that we've had as human beings. It's evolution to get to where we are. And there'll be more evolution as time goes on. But we've got to start somewhere with a conversation that acknowledges why things are. Again, my corporate background, and this is for anyone who's in any type of field of problem solving, the first thing that you do is acknowledge that there's a problem. Then you look at the history as to say, why does this problem exist? Why are we here? The one question that I encourage people to use that we don't use enough is asking why. Like, why? Why does this happen? Why are we here? Why are there ghettos? Why do black people die at higher rates? Why do black people eat these foods versus the other foods? Why is this happening? And if you have a narrative in your mind that you believe is true, which is, hey, they're inferior, you're not going to change that unless something serves as a catalyst or you have an impetus that makes you go learn something new. But it doesn't benefit the system for people to know about Thurgood Marshall or bell hooks or anyone else. It just doesn't benefit the narrative. You start to make people think something different. And if you make people think different, they act different. If you have people acting different, then the results are different. If the results are different, then the whole game is changed. And going back to your point about class, like, here's the funny thing. Capitalism is monopoly. And never once have I heard anyone who wins the game of monopoly care about what their symbol was. It doesn't matter if you're the car or the jet. In other words, your race doesn't matter. It's class. This is a money game. This is a money game. And the quicker we realize that, especially those who are not in good financial positions, going back to the point that we made earlier, the moment that poor white people and poor black people come together is the moment that the whole system gets burned. It's done. Because you can't stand on anything. Your whole foundation is based on a hatred out of fear of another group of people. And you talk about like redlining and these principles. When I think about the fact that it's going to be much more difficult for me to have wealth generationally because my grandfather could not legally purchase land. He could not legally purchase a home. So while my counterparts are having the ability to live in that generation after generation and one day maybe even sell it, you got an influx of cash, you can go invest it. Now you've got more money. I can't do that. No one passed me anything down. They couldn't. What could they do? It's just fascinating, man. Like I personally don't understand it because I'm very curious and I always like to understand why things are the way that they are without judgment and just allowing things to be. I don't really care why it is. I just want to know why it is so that I can move on that reality. But so many people, and this goes back to the other point in the conversation, which is the ignorance and the critical thinking and the ability to control people through these avenues of media and stories and so on and so on. Like it's all by design. And I question whether or not we want it to change. I know some of us do. I think more people seem to be coming around to being open to it, especially when we had the last election. I think you started to see people really take a side in terms of just what they believe in, what's right and what's wrong. But sometimes I wonder, do we really want systemic change? I feel like the only people who want systemic change are the people who benefit and the people with good hearts that realize that they're at an advantage. And that's the way I would look at the two of you gentlemen. I would say you understand that there's an inherent disadvantage for me as a black person in America. Yep. You didn't do anything to make that. I don't think you perpetuate those things, but you can acknowledge it without making it a personal thing, without self-attack or attacking other people. And a lot of people can't do that. To acknowledge it for some people is to say that, oh, you're saying that I don't deserve to be where I'm at. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that I don't deserve to be where I'm at. And I'm here where I'm at because of these things that have happened historically. And all I'm asking you to do isn't to give me a handout, isn't to make this better for me. It's to acknowledge it so that we can work together to build an equitable system. If that's what we say is we want as Americans. That's the American way, according to Americans. But
it's just acknowledging the birth lottery. It's just acknowledging the birth lottery. That's all. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, but you're right though. I mean, people make things like so personal, like the whole fake controversy about like Republicans getting all up in arms about the Colin Kaepernick thing. It's like, it's not about fucking you. Like you either like football or you don't. Like whether he stands for the anthem or whether he kneels, like stop making it fucking personal. Stop making it about you. If you feel that way about your country and you want to get up and you want to salute the flag, do it. But understand that that America doesn't treat everybody the same. That's not a hard concept. It does not treat everybody the same, and like people have fucking died. I mean, and what these conservatives don't seem to understand is like, and I'm not talking militarily necessarily, but people have fought and died for somebody to choose or not choose to salute to salute that flag. It's not about you, What he does doesn't affect you, and especially in a game like football, it's like watch it or don't. You're showing up to watch the game, but and it's just like. But it's like you're right. They make it so personal, right? But like, I mean, I remember and maybe Cody can have a story too. So I'm not just monopoly again, but I remember like about 10 years ago, driving around with at that time I had a black girlfriend, and this was a very stark. I saw a very stark contrast because I will say, not bragging, it's just saying, like I've just never gotten pulled over. Just never have. And I'm not saying I drive great. I come to rolling stops. When I see yellow, I step on the gas. I mean, but she didn't have that luxury of being able to come and I would see her. We would be driving, and we got pulled over. And it was a stark contrast, a visceral contrast of how I saw how she was doing the exact same shit that I would do, and she would get pulled over, and I'm just like, fuck. You know, I've never. I mean, I think what it takes for people like myself or Cody or any white person is just a concerted effort to. Now, I'm not saying we have to go down the road of some of these extreme people of constantly interrogating ourselves, but just seek out the information of. I mean, when I was a kid, I always wondered this. Why do black people run from cops? That was just a question I had. Why do they run from cops? Because my thinking was, well, if you've got nothing, if you're innocent, why? And then it took me to read and talk to people, you know, some harsher, you know, yelling at me harsher than others to understand, oh, I get it. I get why, even if you're innocent, you know, then I got it. But, you know, unless you you have that question, you're not going to get the answer, right? Yeah, so unless you're to ask, like, well, why are they doing that when you're young? Or you're not going to get the answer of, oh, it's because cops fundamentally treat black people different than they would treat me. I mean, they're a threat. I mean, I remember, sorry, Cody, I remember I read a flyer from the Black Police Association. I came into where I taught, and I saw things laid out, and it was put out by the Black Police Officer Association. And on the front of it, it said in the language, and I brought this to class as a teaching experience. I'm like, I just got this. Let's go through the wording of this real carefully. It said, what to do when you're stopped by police. And I said, now, isn't that interesting? It doesn't say if. And then it said all these different things about don't make sudden movements, keep your hands where you can see them. And then I pulled up a simultaneous flyer of how to handle a wild animal. And I said, looks similar, doesn't it? Like, don't make sudden movements. And it's like, so I'm like, basically, black people have to act like when they interact with a police officer, they have to act like how I would have to act if I was walking through the woods and I saw like a bear.
Yeah.
Now we can see why they run. Now we can see why they are, you know, I mean, when I say they, I'm lumping them all. I'm not saying all of them, but in general, sure. You get what I'm saying. I don't want to give the wrong impression. So,
well, I would Cody? Say this, if real quick, the fact that you were curious, and there's a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. 2 agreements that you're talking about. Don't make assumptions and don't take things personally. So you didn't make an assumption. The problem with most people in this situation, or the folks that are not like you and Cody, are they already know the answer. There's no curiosity. I already know because somebody over there told me why black people run. Oh, they run because they're thugs. They run because they're murderers. They kill each other. They're barbaric. They're animal. You had a curiosity to it, which acknowledges I don't know. Let me go find the answer. That's it. That's the only difference. Is like just you didn't assume that you had the answer, and you didn't have a narrative that it needed to fit. So there was no confirmation bias. I didn't need to validate what I already believed to be true. That is the key to this whole thing, man. Ask more questions, seek more knowledge, get more perspective. Don't make the assumption. which goes back to the question: do we really want things to change, or are we comfortable where we are? And I think it's very much dependent upon your mindset, and folks like you. I wanted to point that out real quick. Sorry, Cody.
That's right. No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And be comfortable with saying, I don't know. Right?
I don't know.
A lot of people are always there, like, be comfortable with saying, by asking a lot of why questions, and then also be comfortable with having those why questions be, I don't know.
I don't know.
And it could be for years. I don't know.
I don't know.
And instead of trying to make up something, just be like, you have no idea. Throughout my day, people ask me questions, and I just have to say, I don't know.
You've asked me questions on here. I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know everything. It's not like I actually need to put off this ideology or this image that I do know I don't know every author. I don't know every book. I haven't read every book. I don't know. Let me write it down. Let me go. But that's what, to me, that is a vital sign of intelligence. Like, the smartest people recognize that they don't know everything. Right. Which means that you're going to go learn more because you recognize you don't. If you think that you already know everything, why would you learn? You already got the answers. What is there to learn? I don't need to go learn my ABCs because I already know them. But if I'm looking at it in a different language, then I have no clue. I got to go learn. That's what intelligence is to me. That's what lifelong learning is. So yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Great point.
And it's the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Somewhat.
Okay.
But maybe if you teach me, it'll either
come to me
in full or not know.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert, and Cody, feel free to chime in if I get something wrong. But it's basically people who are like, there's a tendency for lack of a better word, either ignorant or stupid people to overestimate their abilities, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, like, you ever see somebody who's like just really confident in what they're doing, and you're just like, this person's fucking stupid. They don't know what they're talking about, but they're rattling on and on. But then there's a reverse, which is something like a tendency for like highly intelligent people to really doubt themselves and be like, I'm not so sure if I'm good enough or whatever. But like, so, anybody who's too confident in themselves, not that confidence is bad, but like when they get to a level of super confidence, I'm like, all right, there's something that's a little bit off. This might be an instance of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Cody, what do you have to do? You were going to say something?
I was going to add, I always describe it as the person is too stupid to realize how stupid they are.
Yeah. Yes, that is it. Simple.
Like all of us have that. Like, okay, so like all of us have that like dumb. All of us, we all have that dumb relative, that aunt, that uncle. And they just run their mouth on every conspiracy. It's like, fucking, like I'm sure you. I mean, Jonathan, you must have someone like that in your family where you get together with a family reunion. You're like, ugh, not this fucking person again. Like, and like I have one in my family, and it's just like giving in. They have all these QAnon conspiracies. It's like, come on, dude.
and think about the amount of time that they have invested in getting those talking points. Like it's whatever platform, whether it's the news or a newspaper or whatever it is that they've consumed, they've spent a lot of time becoming the expert in that. Don't know why. And that goes back into self-identity. Now you're talking about how we look at ourselves, and whoever that person is feels like that's what they need to be, or that's what's expected of them from other people. So then they feel like they have to become. It's just a lot. Oh my gosh, man! It's a lot. There's a lot of gems in this conversation. There's a lot of knowledge in this discussion, man. I'm extremely happy to talk with the like-minded, and not because people think like me. It's more you already know that there's enough of the other thoughts. But when you get a chance to have these types of conversation, I think it's extremely refreshing and beneficial. So, yeah, man, I Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah, play down the. I know it all.
That's why. How do I say it? It's so fascinating to me. Like some of them, you can almost predict if somebody is going to succeed, how well they're going to succeed in the long term by how much confidence they have. So, for instance, there was a story that Henry Rollins told about how he was going to open up for Ozzy Osbourne. Now, this was, I think, in the 90s or whatever. I mean, okay. One of the godfathers of heavy metal, right? I mean, I don't care who you are, you know Black Sabbath. I mean, there is nobody, there's no group bigger in terms of impact on heavy metal than I would say Black Sabbath or maybe some other bands too, Dio as well. But I mean, but even then, right? Even being, Henry Rollins said he was pacing kind of by the curtain and he's like, I'm scared to look out there. And Henry Rollins like, why? It's like, I'm always scared no one's going to show up and no one's going to want to see me. He's like, are you nuts? Like the place is packed.
Yeah.
Like, I'll look out for you, dude. It's packed. You're like, do you not know who you are? And he's like, yeah, man, but I'm always scared no one's going to show up. It's like, that's why he's successful, because he never thinks he never is so sure of himself that he thinks, he always has that lingering thing that maybe I don't got it. Maybe no one's going to show up, right? There's just certain things that I've heard throughout my life, just certain patterns, I guess, that someone who's super, super confident, they're like, I got this, right? That they tend not to, but people who are really filled with, and I'm not saying that self-doubt, there can be crippling self-doubt, but to always have that kind of humility about you and always be like, this could be it, this could be the last show I do. And then, kind of, that sort of keeps your head in the game in a way, kind of keeps you focused, where if you get way too comfortable, I don't know, not to slag somebody off, but then you may be like Kanye West, who fucking meets with Donald Trump and is then made a laughing stock. Did you hear about that? Do you remember that when Snoop Dogg started trashing Kanye West?
Yep.
And I'm gonna be honest, I liked his music. Like I thought he put out some real but I just cringed when he was meeting. I'm like, oh, dude, how do you?
Yeah, you and I think a bunch of millions and millions and millions of other people had that same cringe moment. So I don't think you are alone at all. In fact, I'm reading. I'm almost done with this book about Nipsey Hussle, and there's a extensive section in that because apparently, and I didn't know this at the time, but they had came out with a song called FDT right before the election, like 2016, for Donald Trump. And it became a big deal. And that's when Kanye and all of the stuff with Snoop, and he and Snoop were cool. So they were it was a big thing. And it's he's a character. And even to see like his change since then and what he's been through and how he's processed people are extremely interesting. And I think the word I want to go back to real quick is humility. That's the way that I process what you were saying in terms of overconfident versus under, and just realizing that like you're a vessel for whatever it is that you're doing, and that could be taken away whenever something could happen. You got to keep focusing on improvement, every day improving, continuous improvement. I think is a way to think about whatever it is that we're pursuing, whatever that we're doing.
And never satisfied. I mean, and never be. I mean, at least this is what I take it as: is like, I'm cool with the things that I've had published, I'm cool with that. There's some things I might look back on and kind of cringe at, but fuck it. It let me, but like I always have the attitude of, I want the next piece to be better in some way, And I think that's also like important too, is it's never just be I never want to be stagnant. I always want to have everything something I put out, I want it to be better. And once I hit a point where I can't make even makes a small change to make the next piece better, then I just got to put down the pen, as it were, right? And anybody who says, especially in any kind of artistic endeavor, I've reached you, then you're done. Then you're just producing the same. Always try to improve on. I don't know what else to say. Always have that, try to improve and look back on it. I mean, I don't mean to return to something, but even like Eminem said, he looks back on some of his old albums and he's like, oh, fuck. And he said he cringes and he's like, fuck it, it let me do this, right? He goes, I look back on it, I listen back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Because I think it was on, I think Relapse or whatever. He was doing all these different accents, which he had to do so that he could bend words to right. And he's like, fuck, I didn't even know I was doing all these accents. And it's just, he goes, I look back and I was thinking, I cringed at it, but fuck it, it let me do this album. And then I look back on that album and I'm like, I wasn't so happy with how some of that went, but you know what? Let me do this. So if it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be. So I kind of learned. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like you can look back on it, kind of cringe at it, but then be like, oh, but that let me do this other thing, and this other thing. So
without the first iPhone, we're not on this right now. I'm on a MacBook. I got an iPhone charging next to me. There would be no iPhone 10. There would be no iPhone 15 or whatever that it's going to be in the future. And that's a great point. I think that's why people don't do what they want to do. They're afraid of that failure, and they're afraid that they'll look at themselves as a failure. But the most successful people, including Eminem, it's going to be the same thing, man. It's like you got to do the thing to get to the thing. You got to do the things to become the person. Once you become the person, you get what that person gets. So be, do, have is kind of the mantra. You got to be that person. You got to become that person. Well, how do you become the current Eminem? Is by becoming that. But you don't do that without Relapse. You don't do that without the Marshall Mathers LP. You don't do that without Slim Shady being Slim Shady. Like, you've got to go through the process. And what we want is to end up being what Eminem is now without going through the process of what he's been through.
Can't happen.
Yeah, anybody.
Yeah, they want the shortcuts without the numerous failures, which are inevitable, right? I mean, that's why there's a really, I'm sure you've heard the Man in the Arena speech. Yeah, I mean, that was when whenever I'm feeling, I don't know, I get in stages where I look at a piece I'm working on or something, I'm like, man, this sucks. Or something that doesn't quite work out, or I think about giving up, and just keep showing up. Even if you get beat up, even if you get beat up, I mean, it's gonna happen. It happens. It's so universal. Like the story that there has to be truth to it, that everybody that has any kind of success has failure after failure after failure after failure. I mean, but the only difference is that they keep showing up. They keep showing up to the arena. They keep getting back. That's going. The only thing. Yeah, that's the motivational part of this podcast here.
Yes, keep going. 2 words: keep going. No matter what, keep going. The marathon continues. It is going back to The Alchemist. Santiago could have given up multiple times on the journey, had plenty of reason to do so. No one would have questioned him. Hey, man, you lost all your sheep. I get it. You got robbed. You're broke. I get it. But he didn't. He wanted what he wanted. And that's the only difference. And I've studied the people who've done it, to your point. And it doesn't matter if it's Sarah Blakely or Oprah Winfrey. It doesn't matter if it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Tyler Perry or whoever. It doesn't matter. Their stories are all the same. There's something consistent. And the tenacity, the belief, which leads to continue going, because you don't continue going if you don't believe you're going to get there. Like, you got to believe. It starts with your belief. I believe that it's going to happen one day. And it may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be next year. But one day I'm going to get there. And if you continue going, you will inevitably get there. And in the words of Will Smith, in terms of his book, he talked about there's only two options. And I grew up a military kid, so I understand exactly what he's saying. When you got a mission, you either complete the mission or you die on your way to completing it. It's only two options. There is no quitting. That's not, you don't do that. You don't quit. You may have to regroup. You may have to take a break. You may, whatever it is that you need to do. But what you will not do is quit on your mission. And that's the cheat code. You're right. People look for the shortcuts. They're looking for the exceptions and nah, bro. It's, you want to get to that other side, then this is what you got to do. That mud that you see, that sweat that you got to pour down, those tears you got to cry, that blood you're going to shed, it's all part of the process. And if you want what you want and you believe that you'll get it if you keep going, then you keep going. If you don't believe, you'll stop. And that's it. That's the only difference. So yeah,
I would say you don't even have to believe in yourself so long as you keep showing up.
It will. That's a great point. I believe that if you keep showing up, you'll fuel the belief. It's almost like a loop. So you do, and then you get the confidence, and then you do, and then you get the confidence. You do, and you keep getting, and you just keep doing. The confidence builds. So I agree. I think it's just a positive loop versus the negative loop. So yeah, man, but either way, that is what I know to be true. The key, keep going. So whoever hears this one day, whoever's listening, watching, whatever the case is, keep going. You got a dream, keep going. You have a mission, keep going. Whatever it is that you are in pursuit of, continue going until you get there. Then when you get there, make another goal. Climb another mountain. Do whatever it is that you want to do, but do it. And keep going until you get there.
Well, and I think that a lot of people are afraid of failure, which here's the thing though, and this comes from Jim Carrey actually said this. He says, listen, you can fail at something you hate. Why not fail at something you love? You know, because he told a story about his dad, right? His dad took a safe route, was laid off, and he says he hated it. He goes, and what Jim Carrey's learned, and this was sort of this is such an eye opener for me when I heard it. I'm like, fuck. When he said, you can fail at something you hate, so why not try something you love?
Yeah. Yep. Simple. And people are like, oh, well, I got to spend 2 years, 3 years before I get to where I'm going. But the time's going to elapse either way. You're either going to be
30 years.
It might be
30 years.
Yeah. But 30 years from now, you're either going to be where you want to be or where you don't want to be. It's only two choices. So your pursuit in whatever capacity is what's going to determine where you're going to be. Even right now, you know, for each of us, in 5 years, I'm pretty sure of where I will be because that's the plan. And I'm going to keep going until I get to that plan. It may not be 5 years. It could be 3. It could be 10. But I've got a clear direction in terms of what I want to accomplish in my life and what I want my life to be. And if you guys have the same for yourselves, you will be there. If we have a conversation 5 years from now, we will be exactly where we said we will be because that's the plan and the action that is going to lead us to getting there.
Well, we definitely got to have you back on. I mean, right, Cody? For sure, we got to have you back on.
Love it. I'm so honored. I appreciate it. I'm very excited. This has been a great conversation. I'm so honored and thankful for the opportunity. It's inspiring. Like y'all have inspired me, man. It's good just talking to good people. And for me as a Black dude, it's good to talk to good white people, good white dudes that's just positive.
I'm sure down in Georgia you meet a lot of not so good. I'm sure down in Georgia you meet a lot of not so good.
Hey man, listen, I try to stay in Atlanta as much as possible when I'm in Georgia, bro. I don't go to. There's some parts of Georgia I have no interest in going whatsoever. So, and last question, where are y'all both located? I know, Cody, you're in the Central Time Zone. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Chicagoland area.
Okay, I thought that's where you were. Sebastian, what about you?
Yeah, I'm in Indiana.
Nice. Okay.
Well, I mean, it was the great state that gave us Mike Pence, so I don't know how nice that would.
I thought you were going to say Larry Bird, but hey, all good nonetheless.
No, I mean, Indiana is like the South without any benefits of culture that the South at least brings. It's just a fucking. Needless to say,
terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. I'm planning to move. I'm planning to move soon. Hopefully soon, because you drive around and you see like.
No, I get it. I've been there.
People, yeah, you've been here. And for anybody who's listening to think, oh, maybe it's a good idea to come to Indiana. Well, having a tag on your toe would probably be better. It's the place where your soul goes to fucking die. Like,
wow.
Well, okay, let's put this in perspective. You know where the last? Okay, I'll put this in perspective. The last, the famous image of the last major KKK lynching, where it's got everybody standing around,
looking back at the camera.
That was Indiana. Was Indiana.
Hey,
okay, here's the type of people that Indiana produces. It produces Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses. That's the kind of people that we got. Fucking troglodytes. And I make no apologies. I hate this and I vowed never to go further south because I'm like, if this is as bad as it is, I can't imagine the kind of troglodytes I would meet. I mean, like in Florida or Georgia or just like, ugh. I mean, sorry if that comes across as judgmental, but I see enough Confederate flags the way it is.
Wow.
I can't imagine. Yeah. And I tell people, like, you're not even part of Indiana wasn't even part of the Confederacy. The fuck?
Heritage, not hate.
What?
Heritage, not hate.
Oh, fuck out of here with that. I see people say that. Fuck out of here with that shit when people say that to me. That's the funniest thing. That's the funniest thing was like the funniest thing was when you try to hear some of these people say like, no, slavery wasn't fought over, or the South, the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. It was states' rights. And it's like, look at the documents. They're very explicit. Like, just look at the original documents. Well, states' rights to own slaves. But it was it's like you can like it's not even controversial. Like look at the actual documents of succession. They explicitly, without shame. Of course, they're not going to have shame. With no shame about what it was about. I mean, and so what that flag represents. I mean, if that's what you want, if that's your heritage, fuck your heritage. Your heritage sucks. Your heritage was about your. What I say to them is your heritage is what Adolf Hitler talked about in either chapter 2 or 3 of Mein Kampf. You want to be admired. You want your heritage being admired, talked about highly by him. Yeah. I don't. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I guess you do you, bro. If that's what you want to, just stay the fuck away from me.
Love it. It's so. Thank y'all. And I'm glad we ended on a funny note too, because this has been great. I'm again, thank you so much. I appreciate what y'all are doing in this lit space. Let me know if I can ever be of service.
I appreciate you coming on, man.
By all means, no. Thank you for joining. I mean, I knew pretty much nothing about you. Cody just said he's just hit me up as I got this really cool guy, and I go, all right. And so I came in pretty much blind, and holy shit, I mean this with all my heart. You are super cool, man. Like, you're one of the coolest fucking people we know. So
I appreciate it. I extend that goodness back to you both. That's why I truly mean it when I say that this has been a great conversation, and I am thankful for this opportunity, because y'all are some cool dudes too, man. This is what the world should be, and that's it. Simple.
100%. Yeah. If we can do anything, I was going to add one last thing is if we can do anything to help the organization out. I mean, we don't publish children's books or anything, but
sure.
I mean, in any other capacity, we're more than happy to help out.
Absolutely, I will let you know for sure. And it is a two-way door. So let me know if there's ever anything that I can do to support you guys as well. Yeah, man, and we'll keep fighting this good fight to make the world what it can be.
Yep,
yeah, Cody, send me Jonathan's email, and we'll see what he can do, what we can do for one another, right? For in terms of spreading the word about the awesome work you're doing, and then also, yeah, maybe get our books in hands too. Although I will say, at least for our stuff, probably would be frowned upon if you gave it to like children.
That's all right.
It would have to be teenagers or adults. Otherwise, you're going to get people that are going to hate on you.
Yeah, I get it. That. But I'm pro all books, so if they can get with it or get left behind. That's how I look at it. And yeah, we'll find an audience, man. There's an audience for everything. So it's just a matter of putting a little work in to find the right people. Like we said, find the right books. They're there. The people are there. Otherwise, they would have never come to someone to be written down on paper and sent out to folks. So, yeah, hit me up. We'll get a conversation going, and then we'll move from there.
Sounds good, man.
That sounds good, man. As much as you say it's been a pleasure, it's been
double for me.
It's been a depressing week for obvious reasons, but this has been an uplifter. At least for me, you've uplifted me and given me a little bit more hope in humanity. So,
so some of that awesome optimism has rubbed off on both of us, I think.
Hey, yeah. Let's get it. Let's go. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Y'all enjoy the rest of the day and the evening.
Yeah, take it easy, man.
Take care.
Until next time.